Okay, I think we can start. So hi everyone, thank you for taking the time tonight to join us for this event, which marks the first time that the NTU Entrepreneurship Society is collaborating with the SMU Eagles. So both the NTUES and the SMU Eagles, we are the flagship student-run entrepreneurship societies in NTU and SMU respectively. Thank you, Gerald and team, for making this possible. My name is Terrence. I'm a Vice President of the NTUES, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. We are honored to have with us three leaders from the startup ecosystem in Singapore. Warm welcome to Mr. Shaun Heng from Spartan Group, Ms. Krshna Prashant from Flash Coffee, as well as Ms. Jesslyn Phoon from Talenox. Big thank you to our esteemed speakers for taking time off their busy schedules to speak with us tonight, and I'm excited for the upcoming conversation that we're going to have. So just to share with everyone, the general flow for this event would be this. I'll ask some general questions and then I'll move on to questions that will be targeted to each speaker, but the other speakers can chip in, of course. And then after that, I'll open the floor up to the audience. So we've actually already collated quite a few questions from the audience pre-event, but please feel free to ask away later during the Q&A session. So you can either type in the chat or you can unmute yourself when we give you the go ahead. So the best question might actually stand to win a Grab voucher from Gerald, who's the president of the SMU Eagles. So now maybe we can start by having our speakers share with us more about what their company does, what they do, and maybe what a day at work looks like for them. Maybe you can have Shaun go first.
Sure. So very nice to meet everyone. I understand it's exam week right now, so thanks for taking time for this. So a very quick one, right? I'm Shaun, head of Spartan Labs. As Terrence mentioned, Spartan Labs is actually part of the Spartan Group. If you guys are not aware of, Spartan Group is actually a crypto native investment and advisory firm. And so traditionally, we've always focused on the two main core business, one on the advisory front, and also one is, we have a $100 million DeFi fund and $200 million metaverse fund. And I think as part of the next evolution of the business, we launched the third arm of Spartan, which is the Spartan Labs. And the goal is to build a $100 million venture building studio to churn out or to launch multiple different startups within the Web3 space, in the shortest time possible. And yeah, I think my role is to help, incubate and accelerate a bunch of these products along the way.
All right, I think I can go next. Hi, everyone, I'm Krshna. I actually graduated from SMU, so it's really great to see people from SMU in the crowd here. That's really exciting to come a full circle because I've attended similar talks as these. So yeah, I mean, really excited to be here. I am head of marketing for Singapore at Flash Coffee. So for those of you who might not be familiar, our North Star at Flash Coffee is to democratize specialty coffee. The idea is that coffee doesn't have to be expensive. It's just sort of been the norm that specialty coffee starts at, $6 a cup. And, as coffee culture grows in Singapore, which is, largely a tea drinking market by default, we start seeing that people are not really looking at coffee as an aspirational drink where they're sitting down to have a conversation or study and stuff like that. And people are really starting to see it as a survival kind of drink in the morning. So we are very much focused on grab and go. So unlike Starbucks are the more legacy brands that tend to invest a lot in, furniture, Wi-Fi, lots of baristas, we try to have as many outlets as possible across the nation, and then also have very little real estate. So it's kind of no frills, and we're able to pass on those cost savings to the customer without compromising on the quality of the coffee. So that's broadly what Flash Coffee does. And we also have a tech layer to it where you're allowed to kind of order through the app. So you can skip the queue, you can pick up, and you also earn loyalty points, participate in challenges. So a large part of my job is also building that ecosystem and then creating that loyalty that comes with it.
Hey, Krshna, I just had Flash Coffee this afternoon.
Oh, really? That's great to know.
Yeah, so everyone, my name is Jesslyn. I was also from SMU just a few years back. And yeah, actually, Krshna, we had Flash Coffee a few years ago at SMU, man.
Especially during exam time.
Coffee, especially yeah, during exam period and like during our projects, in the library and stuff like that. So yeah, I really appreciate Flash Coffee. So my name is Jesslyn. I'm the head of marketing at Talenox. Talenox is actually a local HR software company. I don't know if I can call us a startup anymore because we've been around for about 7 years now. And well, I've been in the company for 7 years as well. So yeah, that's a short and sweet introduction from me. Thanks.
Got it. Thank you guys for sharing. And as you all know, a lot of us are still in school, and we'd love to know how you guys got started in the space. So you guys have been in the space for quite a while now, but I'd like to maybe ask you guys to do a mental throwback to your school days, just to get a sense of how perceptions may have changed in the past few years. So what were some of the preconceived notions that you guys had about working in a startup when you were back in school? Was working in a startup seen as a legit career path back then? Maybe you can have.
Maybe I can sort of go first. I mean, I started my career a bit differently, where I went by the more traditional route. So I went into investment banking right after graduation, and I think very soon found out that wasn't the best learning ground for me. So I mean, even in school, and I was from NUES actually, and I think the whole entrepreneurship scene has already been very vibrant on that front with NOCs and stuff. But there's always that preconceived notion that it's going to be very messy. There's no branding and like startups, and so I went by the more traditional route. I go into investment banking, but within a year I sort of got out, and went into a startup. At that point, it was a Series B company called RedMart, an online grocery company, and so I was sort of doing like corporate development on that front. But I think I sort of, having gone by that journey itself, I never looked back. I think it's startup gives you a very different sort of environment where it's very hands-on. It's very entrepreneurial. I think there's a lot of things that's self-initiated. It could get very messy very quickly, but I think it's also the onus is on you to make sure that you help to shape and craft the company that you join in the right direction as you see fit. So I think there's a bunch of learnings to be done, but that also doesn't mean that it's bad to join a corporate just to have that kind of structure and order in place. I think the best kind of entrepreneurs or the best kind of people we see sometimes come from a mix of both worlds, right? I mean, they came from maybe a corporate world for a while, and then they go into the startup ecosystem itself, and you bring that sort of that thought process, that tenacity and that kind of structure into a startup, and that's how you then value it to those companies that you join. So I think it's really a no right, no wrong. I think it's more of a mental or mindset shift that you have to be very comfortable with, that a startup is always going to be messy, but you learn a lot and you enjoy yourself along the way.
Yeah, just to add on, I completely agree with Shaun there. I think the messy part, yeah, that can be quite true. As for myself, I mean, you asked us to look back on our uni days, right? In SMU, I was a finance and marketing major. Very very stark contrast. And I think most of my peers at that time wanted to pursue, a job in banks. Actually, that was also one of like my choices at first, right? But I think somewhere along the way, perhaps in my second year or so, I realized that I was someone that just wanted to like get things done. I was somebody that was quite I don't know, hands-on. I think I just always had a lot of ideas. So I think that's when I decided to kind of like learn to code, because I thought that okay, maybe a lot of my ideas were like technology focused, but because I was doing finance and marketing, so I didn't have those skills, right? So my friend and I, like, we taught ourselves how to code. Our grades slipped. I'm not condoning you guys to like forego your exams and stuff, but slipped a bit lah, okay, not so bad. And then I just decided to like venture out and do my own thing, in my first year of graduation. Not the popular choice, I would say, and definitely, you might face a lot of friction and obstacles obstacles, I think, also like from your parents or maybe from your own like circle of friends. I think the hardest part was actually to grapple with the idea of like everyone having that stable job and income every month. But then if you were to start your own company or let's say, join a startup, depends on which stage the startup is in. But I think money is not something that you would like, let's say you were to work in a bank, for example. Yeah, and it's not something that may come every month like that. So you just have to like stand firm in what you believe in and what you want to do. And I think, yeah, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I totally second that. I think, looking back at my uni days, joining a startup was not considered that aspirational, especially if you're graduating from SMU, where it's pretty much a very one-track sort of goal in terms of getting into a bank or working for a really big brand. As marketers, our number one goal was to get to like P&G, Unilever. And I started out my career at Uber. At the time, it was a startup. It was like 5-6 years ago. And that was my first job, and my parents were like, "What? You want to work for a taxi company?" I mean, now Uber is a big company, and it's an MNC in many ways. But when we started out, we were so lean, and so it was very much a startup experience. At the time, I wouldn't say that it was considered aspirational or all that credible, the way that kind of P&G, Unilever are considered the mecca for marketers. So I think there's always that balance of trying to figure out, do you want to optimize for credibility or do you want to optimize for experience? And I think in that moment, optimizing for experience, especially in the start of your career, I believe has served me really well. Just purely learning as much as I can, not being hyper specialized, but trying to be a generalist, dabbling in as many departments as I can has really allowed me to kind of figure out what my interests are, and then also stand me in good stead to take on other roles that might be a little bit more specialized.
Got it, guys. Thanks for sharing. And I think I agree with you guys that a lot has changed since then, even as an undergraduate, because the startup world doesn't seem as foreign to students simply because there are a lot of experiential programs that the universities offer, like NOC, as Shaun mentioned, and NTU and SMU also have their own versions, right? And you guys previously mentioned some of these reasons that drew you guys to startups, like getting to move fast, being hands-on. So maybe I could extend the next question to, what do you think is in your company culture that differentiates them from the typical NNC or SME? And maybe you could dive deeper into some of the pros and cons of working in a startup or some of the trade-offs.
Sure. Yeah, I think, what's different about my startup experience at Flash specifically is just the ability to test small, and how much failure is kind of completely accepted. When you're in an MNC, there are a lot more processes. You're not able to test as quickly. You need a million approvals to get something off the ground. Whereas when you work for a startup, it's a lot easier to bring your ideas to life and then decide if you want to run with it or you want to kill it. So it's a very iterative process. So it really harbors a certain level of creativity where the stakes aren't that high, and you're able to really kind of arrive at the best solution, because in most cases you don't know what that is. And I think MNCs and a more bureaucratic structure doesn't allow for that as much. I think the second one is just a very high degree of ownership, and we're seeing a very tangible impact of your efforts. When you're in an MNC, you typically will work on sort of really large scale products or projects that will take a long time to kind of show the impact of. When you're in a startup, things are moving a lot faster. So you will see, the impact of your work immediately. You'll be able to measure it and then move on. And I think just that level of ownership and being able to see your ideas come to life is very different when you work for a startup.
Jesslyn or Shaun like to add on?
Sure, I can probably add on a point where I think regardless of whether it's a startup or an MNC, the point that you should also be optimizing for is the team and people that you work with. Simply because I think end of the day, when you just start your career, you want to make sure you have the right bosses in place or the right team members that you can work with, because I think that's really where you learn from each other. And I think more importantly, you learn from your boss in terms of, how he or she operates in the environment itself. And I've seen a lot of cases where even in an MNC, when you work with a good boss, your career could also exponentially rise from that perspective. So I think it's not so much about just whether is it an MNC or whether is it a startup, but more importantly, while you go through the entire interview process itself, be truthful to yourself whether you are joining this company because of the brand, because of the or because of like the culture or the team that you work with, because that's very important, and that sort of define your starting career of whether it's a place that you want to work for in the long run, or it's like a short-term stint that you want to move out from as fast as possible. And I've seen a lot of horror stories where once you optimize for a brand, or it could be a brand in a startup, right? It doesn't really matter. It could be a good startup in that sense, but if you're working for the wrong team and the wrong bosses, you kind of get scarred very early on, and that could have a sort of a detrimental effect. So I think that's something that I always encourage my peers and some of my juniors to always have a very clear mindset of like or rather have a very clear goal of really optimizing for your learning opportunity and your bosses and your team over everything else, even more than like compensation, because I think that's really a second afterthought, after like, your learning opportunities and stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with both Shaun and Krshna on that. Actually, I think maybe my perspective is a little bit, I don't know if it's biased or not, but then I've been in this startup. I mean, I joined Talenox right at the start. So it was really like, 7 years of hard work with them. And I guess a lot of people ask me like, so why did you continue staying, right? Like for 7 years already. And I just gotta say, like, it's really because of the people. Ultimately, it's because of the culture, the people. I think when I first decided to even join a startup, it was quite hard for me because I wanted to, like I had my pride. I just wanted to own my own startup. Like, why should I work for someone now? And that was something that I struggled with initially. But I think at the end of the day, it's like what Shaun said. When you decide to join a startup, talk to the founders, have a good like Q&A session with them, get like a good feeling of like how they are as individuals. I think for me, I was particularly drawn to like maybe like I think two values that my founders exhibited. One was empathy, and the second one was like learning. So it was just something that resonated within me a lot. And yeah, for the next 7 years, I think what made me really stay was that I could always feel like my teammates were supporting me and we were supporting each other. I could have honest conversations also with like my teammates. They could have it with me as well, in terms of career progression, or if they want to change their role a little bit and learn something. Because I think if you want to like stay in a company and feel like you're growing, it's not just about the compensation, but it's also about whether you feel fulfilled, right? Like, are you leveling up your skills and being fairly like rewarded for it as well? So yeah.
Just to balance the conversation, I just want to say that working for an MNC also has its merits, and that's something to consider too. I feel like when you work for an MNC and it's got a lot of people, your soft skills like stakeholder management are honed a lot more than you would at a startup, which is a much smaller team. You're also able to specialize a lot better, where you can really focus on one specific thing and hone your skills. So if you find something you're passionate about that's a little bit more niche, an MNC could be more relevant to you. And I think the third is that MNCs have more resources, right? So you will be managing bigger budgets. You will also be using more robust tools. It'll give you a chance to work on, softwares like Salesforce and Tableau and all of these things that a startup might not be able to afford as it starts out. So there's things to consider there as well, based on the industry and what your interests and passions might be.
Got it. Thank you for your insights. And I think some of us here would be very happy to immerse ourselves in the kind of work environment that you guys described. And maybe on a more personal level, going forward, any idea what the future looks like for you guys? Do you intend to continue working in the startup world? Any plans to maybe found your own startup, or will you consider going to the corporate world?
I think personally, once you work for a startup, it's really hard to go back. Just the level of autonomy, the level of ownership is just amazing. I think the learning curve is very steep. And I personally enjoy being a generalist. I personally enjoy being able to do multiple different things and then learn from them rather than hyper specialized. I think that's what sort of sets me up to be working at a startup and eventually be an entrepreneur. But absolutely, I think once you work at a startup, it's very hard to give up all the things that it gives you, even though I think a more corporate role is a little bit more cushy and a little bit more secure. I think there's a lot of thrill in this. And it depends largely on what your priorities are. But I think personally, it's very hard for me to go back now. I'll probably go, closer to starting something on my own route rather than go back to corporate.
Yeah, I guess
Shaun
I
and
can
Jesslyn.
probably I totally agree. I think it's I think once you sort of experience how fast a startup move, and it's also a bit more challenging to want to work in a corporate where unless it's more of you go into a corporate and setting up a new division that's more like innovative, and that you have the right capital to do what you need to do to like start something new on that, like a labs or something like that. If not, it's also very challenging to do so. I mean, sort of not sure how many of you guys are aware, but before I was at Spartan Labs, I was at CoinMarketCap for about 2 years, and then before that I was running my own company. So I've sort of have been through the entire founding journey. I started a company called Etsy, where I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the waffles at
Yeah.
the one where you can order and collect your triplets waffle before your classes starts as well. So I think I've sort of been through the entire entrepreneurship journey a bit, and you just learn along the way. So whatever the case is, eventually if I do want to start my own company again, I think it's going to be a very different journey from what we did in the past. And so I think it's more not so much about what we'll do next, but more of can we be a lot more mindful of what kind of experiences we have gone through so far, and how do we leverage on all these different experiences to do incrementally better than what we did in the past. So yeah, I mean, whether is it starting a new company, whether is it joining another company, I think those options are just things that we can consider, but it's not like I think you just need to have some mental guidance around it. But you never know what the future entails. I mean, I didn't expect myself to go into the crypto or Web3 space so early on as well. But once I've got in, I knew it's also very difficult to sort of look back and say and join a more I would say traditional startup in that sense. No offense, but it's I think it's also a very different sort of pace that the crypto industry or the Web3 industry sort of moving into. So yeah, I think it's just being able to have that tenacity to try different things, figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then just do better in each of these different verticals and strengths and weaknesses. Yeah.
Well, I think if you ask about the future, personally, I think the definition of startups will change over time. I think it already has. I think people used to think that it's messy and lean, and maybe also if you're right at the start, it's super low paying, or employee shares means nothing, things like that. Or it could be the flip side, right, where it's huge unicorn startup and you could gain millions from it and get super good benefits. Well, I think the thing is now a lot of even traditional companies or bigger MNCs, they're starting to operate a little bit like startups already, but not so much on the financial side, but I think in terms of the workflows and the processes. So I think a lot of bigger companies are starting to like employ like flatter hierarchies and quicker decision making. So I'm not quite sure, how the future of, startups will be, or like the entire workforce will be like in the future. I just think that if, if you want to like join a company, then at the end of the day, it depends on like how much you want to learn, versus maybe how much you want to earn. Sometimes it's not going to be directly correlated in that sense. But that being said, like, for myself, I possibly would still envision myself in like, maybe not so much a startup in the traditional sense, like few years, like in seed stage and things like that. But I might actually move on to, I don't know, any company that would still give me that kind of like learning opportunity. Yeah, to kind of like still be innovative in that sense. And I think it's just something that individually you just have to like identify like that value that you see, working with that team or with that company, and also how much you can contribute to them as well. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. So we've actually been stalking you guys on LinkedIn and found that obviously your experiences are different. And then based on these experiences, we've actually collated some questions that might be especially relevant to each of you. So maybe I'll target Shaun first. So Shaun previously shared that you had some founding experience. You were the CEO of Etsy. So based on your founding experience, could you share some tips with the aspiring founders that we have over here? And Krshna and Jesslyn, please feel free to add on as well based on your own experiences working with startup founders, whether they are from your companies or the companies that you work with.
Well, I guess there's really a lot of like, having gone through the entire journey, and we sort of spent about 3 years plus building Etsy, and having to shut it down, I think that there's really a lot of like different lessons being learned at that point in time, but sort of just synergizing for like 3 main points. I think team matters the most in any case, and I can't stress this enough, and maybe that's my opinion, but I think regardless of whether you join a startup or you are starting your own company, the team is really what makes or break the company itself, right? Because ideas can always evolve, business model can always evolve and change over time, but how fast you can leverage on these changes or adjust to these changes really depends on the team that you're working with. So to me, it's like, I think at that point in time, I was really optimizing for like, fundraising and a bunch of other stuff, but whereas I should have spent more time building the team and working closely with the team. And I think that's really, on hindsight, what I should have done better. The second one is also not to be too fixated by the idea itself, which sort of was what I kind of mentioned earlier on, right? I mean, I did recall like when I first had the idea of Etsy, I was very afraid to share it with people because I was afraid people might take the idea and like, kind of do it faster than me, right? But I think sort of having gone through that journey itself, you realize that if someone could have done that same idea in 2 times the speed that you did, you want to work for this guy and not like compete against him, right? You want to learn from this person, how he or she did it. And, I think that's really part of that optimizing for your learning curve sort of scenario. And so eventually I think I started building a team of very trusted peers that is able to bounce idea off each other. And I wasn't afraid anymore to like sort of just go out to the market and like, talk about my idea, because end of the day, if the feedbacks are always the same that it's not going to work, chances are either you are really, really, really smart and you are seeing something that no one else is seeing, and that's possible, but that's like 0.00 something % of like the entire population, or something that's probably wrong about your business model, and you should sort of take this feedback in and internalize and figure out how to do better from it. The third thing about maybe the whole startup journey is that competition and timing do matter. And what I mean by that is sometimes you can have the right idea, but if there is a wrong timing, or you are just faced with too many different competitors at the same time, you have to be very honest with yourself. Like, is it the best thing for you to do it on your own, or to build it as part of a bigger organization? So to give an example, like I did recall when I first started Etsy, and for you guys who are not aware, like we are basically trying to build like a Shopify for the F&B industry, where we allow users to order and pay for their food ahead of time, and just to through your mobile phone, very similar to the whole interaction in China, where you could just order and pay through your WeChat app itself. And so when I was sharing this idea with potential investors very early on, he was like, why not just take this idea and pitch it to Deliveroo, right? Or one of these food delivery guys, because chances are, if there are three things that can happen, right? One is they take your idea and they execute it faster than you, then they're going to do it anyway, right? The second way, it's it's not a great idea eventually, and they don't do it, and you try doing it and you spend like months and years doing it and realize that it's going to fail, right? That's also a bad outcome. The third outcome, which to him was the best outcome at that point in time, was why not you pitch it to Deliveroo, and if they think that it's a great idea, they invest in you to sort of build it by hiring you, and you still get to execute on your idea at the end of the day, right? You still get to build a product that gets into the hands of people, or the users who are using a product at the end of the day, which still serve the purpose, right? So I think that's also very important to sort of take note of, where you have to be very truthful to yourself as an entrepreneur. Like, are you building it because you want to be a founder, or are you building it because there's really a big problem that you saw and that you really want to solve it? And it doesn't really matter whether you're solving it as part of a bigger organization or you're solving on your own. I think the point is, I think you have to just be very truthful to yourself. It's also not wrong to say that I just want to be a boss and like I want to do it. So I think it's sort of like that 3 or 4 learnings that I had, while starting my own company. Yeah, hope that helps.
I think I can add on a little bit there, regarding, when Shaun said build something that, people really want. I think that's also something that we cover. I'm sure you learn in your entrepreneurship modules or even marketing, right? It's called the product market fit. So in a way, build something that people want, or build something that, like it's a solution to a problem that you want to solve. And at that point, I think you need to kind of like separate yourself from your own company, your own idea, and really go out there to the market and start getting like feedback from your customers. So I think the key point that I think I'm trying to drive across is that, for Talenox, we've had so many competitors. We are in a very saturated market space. But that being said, it was never really something that bothered us a lot. I think for us, we knew that we had the backing of like a few really, really great customers that said like, okay, we're going to back you up and we like what you are doing. You just need more resources to like, make it better. And from there, that few customers that we had, they actually became our angel investors. And that sum of money became something that, really propelled us forward. And we just knew that, okay, we need to listen to the market, just focus on what we want to do, keep our heads down a little bit, and, not get into that whole, I don't know, like maybe glitz and glamour of just growing really, really fast. Because I think sometimes there's also dangers to growing very fast. Yeah. Sometimes you do need the money to grow fast and to build and hire. But at the same time, if you don't control it well, then there are some instances where it can become detrimental to the company as well. So like what Shaun said, right? It's always about just like going with what your customers need, talk to your team about it, work together, and really deliver a solution that people want.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think super great points. I just wanted to add, like, one thing is that, which I learned, I think later on, is that when you're thinking about your idea for entrepreneurship, it doesn't have to be radical. It can be incremental on an existing legacy industry, but is just reacting to changing market trends. So, there's nothing like you could almost think that there's no innovation left to be done in a cafe business or in coffee, because it's been around for so many years and it feels like there's very little room for innovation. But when you look at the changing market trends and preferences of people, as simple as just opening more and optimizing for proximity and adding it and digitizing it is not radical. It's incremental on top of a legacy offline business that's brick and mortar, but it makes all the difference to a successful business in this new day and age. So I think as entrepreneurs, you don't always have to look for a radical business idea or a radical problem to solve. It could be a smaller, more incremental problem, but you can capture market share that way as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for your sharings. I think based on what I'm gathering from your sharing so far, the team factor and the product factor is really important. So regarding the team factor, I think this would be relevant to what I'm going to ask Krshna. So Krshna, I saw your LinkedIn post about how the recent collaboration between Flash Coffee and Bumble was actually spun up from a pitch that you did during your interview with Flash, right? So I think there must have been quite a bit of teamwork involved to carry out such a marketing campaign. So could you share with us what team collaboration looks like in your company, such that you can take an idea to fruition?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one thing on my team is that it's a really flat hierarchy. And so everyone is kind of very vocal with their ideas. There's very free flowing conversations. So there's very little kind of room for ideas not to be heard. So I think that's been very, very crucial. And then the second one is not micromanaging and giving everyone on the team autonomy and full ownership. They're accountable for their failures. They get all the success. They get all the credit for their successes. And I think that's kind of like being a mini entrepreneur in whatever project that you're doing, right? So the team is kind of set up to be CEOs of the projects that they're handling. So there's always one key owner. So there was one key stakeholder for the Bumble campaign, and that person was liaising with all the other different teams to rally them. So I think the two things that have worked really well for me is one, just having a flat hierarchy where everyone can share their ideas, and then we optimize for the best ideas, not just the people who are the loudest or the most senior and are more likely to be heard. So you hear everyone. And then once you have a really solid idea, to have one very sort of clear owner who can rally everyone else. The minute you have shared responsibility, it becomes a gray area. So it's very important, whether it's a big company or a small project, to have one CEO who's leading it and who's fully owning it.
Thanks, Krshna. And now turning to Jesslyn. I think from Jesslyn's sharing, we also understand how important product market fit is, which brings us to this product factor. And Jesslyn, I saw that on your LinkedIn, you are a marketer who can also code, which is really impressive. So to what extent do you think someone in a front-end role at a startup, for example, in a marketing or business development role, will need to understand the back-end side or the more technical details of how the product works? Krshna and Shaun, please feel free to answer as well.
That's a really good question, actually. I think that ultimately it depends on the type of product that you're working on. So I think for my company, it's a software company, right? So in that sense, I think it helped that with a bit of knowledge in coding, it kind of helped me to, I would say, maybe communicate with the engineering team a little bit better, because I could actually understand, I think, like some of the struggles that they face, like when they say things like, can you just like push it, like commit this, or can you like I don't know, it's just that I think it gets that, it helps you to like build empathy towards the people that are actually building this product, which is the code aspect of it. In terms of marketing though, if any of you out there are marketers and you're just thinking, should I learn to code just because? I would say that I think it's a useful skill to have, especially if you want to work in a technology company and you want to work very closely with, the product side of things. Is it a necessity? I would say maybe not. Yeah, it's good to have. But at the same time, in terms of like using the coding skills for myself, what I learned was mainly like front end code and JavaScript, I think, and Ruby on Rails. So that actually helped me to like code out like my initial company's website. I did like things like search engine optimization as well. So that actually requires you to understand or be able to code so that you can actually just implement like the changes yourself. Because with search engine optimization, there's a lot of testing, a lot of like coding involved. So I think if you were a digital marketer and you want to like get into that whole like search engine space and technology space, then yes, I will encourage you to like, go and learn a little bit of coding. But if not, right, yeah, it's just not a necessity lah. There are plenty of other skills to learn.
Thanks for sharing, Jesslyn. Now, I think I'll ask a general question that all of you can answer. And I think a lot of people here are very interested to know the answer to this. And that is, what are startups looking for in an intern or employees in general?
Okay, maybe I'll just take this first. Shaun and Krshna, they're like, well, I would say, okay, I'm directly involved in the hiring process for all our employees. So maybe I would say that the first thing that we are looking for is if you actually can, fit into like the values that we have. So I would say every company is different, whether it's a startup or whether it's an MNC. Just be prepared and try to read up about like the company values and like their culture, so that like you will know whether like this company is a fit for you as much as how you might be a fit for them. If let's say you are intending to join like a startup like right from the start, then I would say maybe one thing that we really look for is your penchant for learning, and also maybe your ability to like handle stress and wear different like hats, because there's really a lot of things to do in a startup. There's just so many things to learn, and I think like Krshna said, right, sometimes with like very fast growing companies or with companies that just like are leaner or flatter in that sense, like you have project leads, and no matter what department or what skills you have, you might just be that project lead, and it happens a lot, I think, in startups. Yeah, so aptitude for learning, penchant for learning, and being able to handle like the workload, and actually I guess enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely agree. There's not a lot for me to add there, except that, something to remember is that no one really expects interns to be great technically or, drive some crazy strategy that'll take the company to, greater heights. I think what you expect from an intern is really to bring in some really creative ideas, bring a fresh perspective, connect you with things that you might not have, privy to, and bring insights about potentially a new demographic or audience, how to connect with them. I think in my experience with our most successful interns, they are just people who are creatively trying to problem solve and iterate on our existing offering, on our existing strategies. And it's purely just trying to, be creative and bring things to life that makes a star intern. So I think like Jesslyn said, it's like, being a natural leader in some way, being able to, rally people and get buy-in for your ideas. And then, not expect to be the best just yet. I don't think anyone really expects that, but being okay with a certain amount of failure and I think optimizing for creativity and learning.
Yeah, maybe I'll sort of just add a point. I think all in all, it's also about having the right mindset or the right attitude, while working the startup itself. I mean, a lot of times when we hire like interns, I think it's about alignment of expectation, right? We don't, as employers, we don't oversell, what an intern or what the intern is supposed to be doing within the organization itself. And so we sort of have to have the right alignment internally between both parties to make sure that they know what they're in for. And if there's a lot of hard work involved, I think that's where, during the interview itself, we need to make it very clear to them that there's going to be a lot of late nights. There's going to be a lot of, hard work and failure and sweat and tears and stuff. But if we don't sell that kind of, if we don't align with them earlier on, then I think it's sort of like setting up the wrong expectation. I think that has a lot of detrimental impact as well. At the same time, I think as interns, me thinking back in my own journey as well, I think it's also having that tenacity or the patience to know that we are not going to come in on day one and make a great impact in an organization or change things, 180 degrees, right? I think there's still gonna be a lot of mundane manual stuff that needs to be done. But I think through that entire experience, you sort of build up the right mental strength, the right tenacity, you take on more roles. And I think once you have proven to the employers that, hey, I'm more than capable of doing this and beyond, then you sort of create the right expectation or the right sort of inertia for an employer to say, okay, let me give you a bit more stuff to work on, right? So I think it's really about, number one, alignment of expectation with whoever that you're going to work with. And number two, just having the right mindset, while working on an organization itself.
Thank you guys for sharing. I think now, maybe before we move on to the Q&A session, I can ask a for fun kind of question. So what do you guys think is a problem that more startups should be solving, or trends that you think more startups should be looking at today?
I can probably start here by saying, I think too many of us, when we want to start a company, or a lot of startups, when they start, they are always thinking about, I want to build $1 billion company, I want to build a unicorn. So I'm going to find the biggest problem I can find and try to solve it. Right? I think that's also where you are sort of on one hand waiting for the right problem to appear, or you are either that, or you think that your idea is just one and a million different ideas, right? So I think just having a very realistic view where even during my entrepreneurship journey, I thought Etsy could become a unicorn, could be $1 billion company. But I think just having that realism or that reality check that it really doesn't. I think being an entrepreneur means what we said earlier. It's not about being your own boss, but about solving problems. And there are a lot of different problems to be solved. And if you can seek to really optimize for solving problems rather than optimize for the financial outcome that occurs from you solving a particular problem, I think you realize that you're going to become a much better, more successful entrepreneur where you are solving multiple different problems. And maybe some of these ideas that you have could result in a 10, 20, $50 million exit. That's still a good enough outcome. We don't need to always strive to build a unicorn, right? Because that takes a lot of hard work. That means that, and that's once in a million, or maybe less than that right now when valuations are a bit higher. But I think my point is, you can always start smaller, right? Just start by solving certain problems, build up that mental model inside you to really be building a product that solves a problem. Eventually you'll start be able to have the right attitude, the right mindset to take on bigger challenges or bigger problems. So your first idea may not need to be $1 billion idea. It could be a $1 million idea. It could be a $10 million idea. But you sort of build up that discipline and that tenacity to take on bigger stuff. And along the way, you start to realize you have the right core team in place, and you have the right people in place to have you execute and get you to the eventual goal, right? But just start small and scale up from there. Yeah.
Totally agree. I think the other, call out that I'd say for entrepreneurs and a lot of startups is, be super diligent about your accounting and financials. Don't paint a rosier picture than it is for your startup. It's very easy to want to believe that it's doing really well and not account for, some costs there, some costs here, not necessarily go into really continuously question your business model. Is it bringing you the kind of returns that you're hoping to see? Don't be super lax with yourself in thinking that, you can endlessly invest in potentially marketing or more robust tools because it'll propel your growth. Always be super critical of your business model, of your growth rates, and of course, keep a very close eye on your financials, because you might think like what you think is profitable when you break it down and you look at your cost might not actually be. So it's important to always be critical of yourself and have a full bird's eye view on all of your financials and your accounting.
Yeah, agree with that. I think this ties in a little bit with the financials. Maybe I'll touch on something that's a little bit more, I don't know, might be relevant to the students here in terms of like wanting to join a startup, possibly. I think one thing that I would advise startups to do would be, like the financials are important to look at, but it's also important to look at like, making sure that you are thinking about your employees' career progression. So with career progression comes, like fair compensation. And by compensation, I mean like a good base salary and the basic hygiene things, benefits as well, health benefits and things like that. So I think the thing that a lot of, I think, startups struggle with initially is that, because they want to keep themselves in the green. So sometimes they might neglect the portion where, their employees or good people need to be retained well, and they need to feel like they are duly rewarded. So this also attracts like, you guys as well, right? If you want to join a company, you want to make sure that you're going to go somewhere. And if you do stay with this company, it may not promise you like $1 million prospect or anything like that, because fair enough, it may not grow to become that kind of company. But is it going to be a company that will, allow you to see yourself in a different role, or have like X times amount of salary in like 5 years time, or like three years time even? I think it's important for companies to start to look at that a little bit more. And I think also for the students here, like if you do join a startup, like don't be afraid also during your interview to ask, how you're going to grow in this company. And don't be afraid to also like know how much you want to earn, like what's your salary that you have in your mind, and ask the managers for it, because I would believe that a good self-sustaining startup that will one day grow into a great company will be able to provide you with the answer.
Thank you for sharing. And maybe one last question. I can slip in one last question before I open up the Q&A to the floor. And I think this one is directed at Shaun. So Shaun, previously you mentioned, you talked about, you mentioned the term traditional startup, right? So what do you think would be the differences between a so-called traditional startup and a crypto startup? Just curious.
Do you mean from a hiring perspective, or from what kind of differences are you looking for?
Like how do they operate? And maybe from a hiring perspective as well, of course.
Do you get paid in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, how would I put it? I think a Web3 startup is different from a traditional startup. I think it's more from a mindset shift perspective, right? I mean, if I look at any crypto startup right now, I think you have guys who are like 15, 16, 17 years old, who are already like very plugged into the space, and they are considered like seniors in the space, right? So I think it's really where it sort of defies the notion where if I want to be a team lead in a company or in a startup, I need to have maybe some level of experience, or I need to be maybe a certificate doesn't really matter at that point in time. But I think it's more of like, I've seen companies where maybe like a crypto fund, right? The analyst in the fund, it's 17 years old, and he has been in the space for 5 years. And I think that's the beauty of like the crypto industry to a certain extent, where because it's also very decentralized, and it means that anyone who has that propensity to learn and to contribute can do that, at his or her own time, right? And because it's such a decentralized industry where they invite all sorts of contributors to come in. I think maybe one big thing that I could probably think of is where a traditional startup is more of like a closed ecosystem, right? You're joining Uber, you're joining Grab, you have to be part of it before you can contribute to it. But when you think of like a Web3 native company, it's really very decentralized, right? And it means that anyone who is willing to contribute can contribute, at any point in time, regardless of age, location, seniority, and stuff like that. I think that's really the beauty of it being like a very decentralized organization by itself, and that's like the premise of what they call like a DAO, or like a decentralized autonomous organization. So I think it's really that biggest difference where every single day when I speak to people who are building in the Web3 space, I'm shocked by how young they are at times. Like me being like 32, 33 this year, I'm considered really old in the space, right? And you have guys who are like, not even finishing schools, who are starting to build stuff within the space itself. I think that whole energy, that whole enthusiasm, and also because maybe they got into the space early, they became financially free, right? They're able to be a lot more courageous in taking bolder steps and say, look, I'm not working for money, I'm working to give back, I'm working to contribute to a product that I really believe in. I think that's really the biggest difference I could tell from from a Web3 versus a traditional startup in that sense. That's also to say, I think the flip side to that is then obviously you have all these very young and eager people who are contributing, who are great contributors. But when you think about longevity, I think that's then where that notion of like structure, discipline may be lacking, right? Because these guys might be hopping from idea to idea very quickly. And so there's no like tenacity or like longevity, whatever that they're building. I think that's something that we are seeing where, we invest in a company in the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, the industry shift and he was like, I'm not excited to work on this product anymore. I want to exit and stuff like that. So we are seeing a lot more of these companies coming up because these entrepreneurs are just way too young, where they haven't gone through that mental model of like discipline and tenacity being crafted throughout the year. And that's why I feel like you need to have a balance of everything. Yeah.
Thank you, Shaun. And now before we open the timeout to the floor, maybe we can just turn on our cameras for those who have their cameras off so that we can smile for 3 seconds and then we get a screenshot picture from the recording later. Everyone? Also shy.
For Terrence, and also before Q&A, I also need to do a platform Eagles. Yeah, we are having a competition coming up. Yeah.
Is that all? No one's going to turn on camera. Ten more seconds. Okay, Ken. So now I'll open the floor up to the audience. So please feel free to type your questions into the chat, and then I can read it out for you if you are too shy, or you can just unmute yourself and speak. And again, the best question might stand to win a Grab voucher from Gerald.
Or maybe fresh coffee. I think both also works.
No, also can.
Yeah. Maybe I'll take this time.
Fresh coffee.
Okay, maybe I'll take this time to teach a little bit on SMU Eagles. So we are actually running a competition that will open tomorrow on startup ideas. The grand prize for the top 3 winners will be $1,000 cash each for you guys to start off your idea. And also, we are also having a flagship competition at the end of the year, which will have about $70,000 in prize money fund. So the top 3 teams from this mini competition will actually stand a chance to be in the semifinals of the bigger competition as well. So if any of you have, and it's open to all universities and all polytechnics as well. So if you have any idea that you want, you can follow our page at Instagram page at SMU Eagles. Most of the information will be there. Probably we'll post it tomorrow, and the competition will last until I think 21st May. Yeah, we will open it until 21st May for you guys to submit. So you guys can do your exams and think about like what kind of problem do you want to solve, and then try to stand a chance to win one day. Yeah. Thanks. Terrence, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Gerald.
Awesome.
Okay.
Just to add that the best question will also get 1 month of free flash coffee.
Whoa.
So keep it coming.
Okay, Gabriel has a question. He typed in the chat. So he's asking, where can we get mentorship when starting out?
I think if I may, mentorship is kind of, it's an important decision to make. And typically your mentor should not be someone who is on your team or has like some sort of stake in your growth, your path, all of that. At the end of the day, it's something to remember is that someone on your team or even your manager is never going to be entirely unbiased, because they have some stake in it, and it's important to them to kind of lead you in some way to their goals. So I'd say when you join a company, choose a mentor that is a little bit removed from your immediate team and your immediate stakeholders. I'd say that's an important one to keep. And I think the second is don't be bogged down by which industry you're in. Some of the best mentors are people that are fairly senior and will be able to give you perspective. They don't necessarily have to be in your industry. They just need to be people who have an invested kind of interest in you, and you're able to build a rapport with and are knowledgeable to be able to guide you in a more holistic way.
Yeah, I agree with Krishna there. I think just don't be afraid to ask if someone is willing to be your mentor. Yeah, because I mean, even here, right? There are quite a few of us here. So you can even reach out to us if you feel that, we might be someone that you might want to talk to. I'm always open to have a chat. Even if it's not related to like what I do. Yeah, sometimes I think a few of us here, having been through the startup scene, we kind of like can understand how it feels like. So even if it's just to provide a listening ear, support your decisions. Yeah, I can speak the same for Krishna and Shaun here. Yeah, just reach out.
Definitely. And I think the point here is also to note that at this, maybe I could sort of like share a bit from my experience how I went about the entire journey, right? I mean, when I first started out in banking, I knew no one from the industry itself. And so I was sort of bucket mentoring like mentorship as the afterthought after you actually gone down the whole networking route of so I did recall when I was, even till today, right? Like I do proactively reach out to people who I felt has relevant skill sets or people that I want to learn from. It could be about leadership, it could be about team building, it could be about a specific vertical that I want to get into, crypto or whatever the case is. And I think I very proactively will reach out on LinkedIn to all these different people, and maybe out of like 20 people, 3 or 4 might reply, right? But of these 3 or 4 people, you start to get a bit more idea of like who they are, how they whether you vibe with them, whether they can provide something of value to you. And I think if you can find that kind of relationship, you start seeing yourself, you start being able to build that kind of connection with all these different individuals, right, who may have certain skill sets that you want to learn from. And so I think that's also very important, where at a very at any stage of your career, right, I think we always have to do a lot more networking. And I think that I'm always a very big fan of that, where I'm always constantly reaching out to people just to learn more and to be a even better version of myself. And I think along the way, you figure out who actually are the ones who can actually give you the right answer, the right values, and you do your best to try to associate or build a relationship with this person such that he or she becomes like a mentor to you. It doesn't have to be like an official title, like, hey, you want to be my mentor, but it's more of like, if there's anything that you need to discuss or bounce off, there is someone you can reach out to. I think that's more important rather than having like, I have like 5 mentors or whatever the case is. I think just about having that network of people that you can always reach out to when you need to, when you have some issues or when you have some challenges that you need to be resolved, and this person sort of becomes that listening ear to you. Yeah.
Thank you. I see a question from Deborah. She asked, would you say that startups in Singapore have a different culture or process compared to startups overseas? What do you guys think?
I think absolutely, even when I compare my experience at Uber and Grab, Uber was very much kind of a Western culture, while Grab is very much rooted in Southeast Asia. And there were very clear differences in processes. For example, performance reviews at Uber, they were never anonymous. You ask someone for feedback, you know exactly what they say, and you're able to iterate on it. Whereas at Grab, it was always anonymous, and you're kind of like guessing, but then you get the most honest feedback when it is anonymous. So, in Singapore and Southeast Asia, we typically tend to be a little bit more polite. We tend to not be as forthcoming with our feedback, or we'll go through more informal channels than a formal one. And I think the second one that I noticed that was different between Uber and Grab is, at Uber, it would always be based on process and formal meetings. So we would always kind of be a little bit more formal, even if you're in a meeting with your immediate team. Timelines were always honored. People would always set an agenda. You would introduce what the call is all about. Whereas at Grab and even at Flash, where it's a little bit more informal and more Southeast Asian, it's much more informal. You can be a little late to meetings. You don't have to have a set agenda. You're able to be a little bit more informal and build a rapport with people. So it's kind of adapting to the culture that you of the company that you're in, where different things work with different people, and you have to be conscious of what really works with the team that you're with, and to be able to get the most out of them.
Thank you. I see a question from CK. He asked, should we actually go out to the corporate world to develop some skill sets first, acquire some experiences before actually venturing into the startup space?
Maybe I'll answer this. I think you don't have to. Depends on the role that you're looking at, I think. Yeah, so because there's also this saying, right, that sometimes if you work for a startup, you get like 3 years worth of experience in 3 months. So I think, again, it depends on the role that you're applying for before you decide whether, you want to go out to the corporate world and then, apply for a startup, or even vice versa. There are some people that also work for startups first, and then they take that experience and they go out to the corporate world.
Thanks. A question from Muni. For the speakers, you mentioned that it is important to look into the company and its culture before deciding to join. May I know what kind of aspects you are looking at, and how may I find these kinds of information?
I can probably take this question. I think in terms of where you can find this information, there's really 2 kinds, right? One, it's really during the interview itself. Once you have that conversation with the interviewers, you sort of have a good inkling of like whether these people are people that I want to work with. Can I actually learn from them? And do you envision yourself being part of the entire team? I think that's also very important to us. And I think not only the interview process itself, it's also about, I think even on LinkedIn, right? And I use LinkedIn very, very extensively as well, where I think, for any companies that you join, you're going to find previous batch of interns who have worked in the company before, right? Connect with them, reach out to them, find out how they, how was their experience like. There's actually a lot of like due diligence that you can do before you actually decide to accept an offer, because it's not really a one-way street. You have to make sure that as much as they want to hire you, you want to work with them. I think that's really where, both sides are aligned on that front. So I think there's really a lot of different ways you can figure out how to, where to find this information. And sometimes it's gut feeling while you're having the interview. If, the interviewers are always looking at their phone, they are not really like give you the right respect, and they're like, not prepared for the interview, you sort of know that it's maybe not the best place, or maybe the interviewer is just having a bad day and the rest of the interview is like, a good process. So I think it's really just having that kind of gut feeling, and then your background checks with the ex-interns and all. And what kind of aspect, I think is really more of, it's very hard to like put it into a very tangible like matrix, right? It's not like, it's not something quantifiable in that sense, but I think it's more of whether you align with the culture of the company, whether you feel you can envision yourself working or be part of that team itself, and more importantly, whether the bosses in that company or the team that you're gonna potentially be joining is someone you can learn from. I think a lot of these things you can probably get this information by just having more conversations with the ex-interns or anyone who have worked in the company before. So I would say it's actually very, very important to sort of do your own background checks of that company, and not optimize for the branding and the compensation itself, because I think that wouldn't last. You want to make sure you find a place you enjoy working and you are happy going in every single day to work on the stuff, versus like just optimizing for like, okay, I'm going to draw this amount of salary, or I'm working in a big brand name. Yeah.
Oh well, if you are a little bit shy and you don't really want to connect with people that you don't know, like me, you can find out a lot about a company's culture like through their social media as well, to be very honest. Go and look at their TikTok videos, look at their YouTube videos. I know Flash Coffee does really good TikTok videos, like, with their employees as well. If they look like they're having fun, they probably are. And yeah, you can even go and check out, like, look at the employees' LinkedIn profiles. If they're advocates of their company, right, they will be proud to show, like, post their company stuff, company news. They will tag each other and things like that. So I think, yeah, you can do some social media stalking as well. Yeah, besides just reaching out to people if you don't really want to like talk to them face to face.
Thank you. I see that Mai from NTU has a raised hand. Mai, would you like to unmute and speak?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't on my camera now. It's somehow not working. Yeah. So my question is that, so for a startup, right? I know that people always like go to pitching to investor, looking for funding, for grants. So my question is like, so which direction could be a better? Which is that you work, you sell your product or your services, you earn revenue to finance your operations since the beginning, but you still have innovation and innovative idea or services, compared to you not earning revenue and you keep going for finding investor, finding grant and fund to fund your to finance your operation. So which one would be a better strategy, or which strategy? What is the pro and cons? So that's my questions. Thank you.
I think it really depends. Obviously, I think the textbook style answer is probably, it's best to build a sustainable business with a good revenue stream, by building the best product for your customers that solve the problem for them. But I think that's always a textbook answer to any of these startup kind of like, answers, right? But I guess the other element that we also have to take into consideration is the timing itself. You could have the best product and the best, you can have the best product out there, but if the timing warrants where there is a certain competitor in the space that is building something very aggressive, you are going very aggressive to the market itself that you are tackling, then it probably warrants the CEO to, put on more of like a war mode and say, let's raise more capital now. We have the best product. Let's take the market before competition sort of take it. So I think it really boils down to, how much of a business person the CEO or the management team is, right? Because many times it's not just, us sitting. I think building a startup is never a siloed or like a binary thing, right? There's always a lot of different elements at play. There's timing, there's competition, there's regulatory issues and stuff like that. So I think just being nimble, knowing at any point in time what's the best move to make, that should be the answer at that point in time. So there's really no right or wrong answer here, like what's the best thing to do. But I would say at the initial stage, it's always better to only raise capital, or rather maybe to sort of like put it into another way to sort of frame it, it's build a product and build a product that people want to use. Capital should only be raised to accelerate the growth of the product, right? It's not meant to be used to do product testing or to experiment on the product itself. So you should already have a good product before you raise capital. If not, you're always going to be racing around the clock to make sure to build a product or to deliver a product, and maybe by then your revenue runs out or your cash flow runs out, and you need to raise another round of capital or you need to shut it down. So I think it's important to have a good product, but when to raise money, how to raise money, I think that's really more of a strategy issue that happens along the way.
Yeah, just to add on, I think, when it comes to fundraising, every round has its own objective. So, pre-seed is meant to be your proof of concept, to give you as little as possible to be able to build a product so that you can really see, give it enough mileage to test it for real. And that's why you have pre-seed, you have seed, you have series A, you have series B, and then so on and so forth. So, your seed round will typically be your proof of concept, where you can take it to the investors and say, hey, this business model works and there's potential here. And then series A will be where you're able to build a strong foundation to get it up and running and be able to scale. The idea is not, just to like replicate, with every round that you will just keep raising exponentially to do the same stuff. But, for series A is where you build a really strong foundation, and then series B, by then you've got pretty strong investor confidence. It shows that people have been willing to invest in you for like a couple of rounds, or you've been able to raise more money. At the series B level, typically that's when you scale. So it's important to think about what your objectives are for each round of funding.
Yeah, understood.
Thanks, Mai. We have a question from Luke, directed to Shaun. Luke says that he's working in Web3, and Web3 being such a rapidly changing industry, how does one determine which path blockchain a company to work for? Are there certain key metrics that you look at?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think there's really, again, no right or wrong answer. I mean, I sort of have been through that same thought process at CoinMarketCap before I sort of decided on Spartan. So I think the point is, like to your point, like what you mentioned, right? I think the whole industry is still moving very quickly. So you have to also then decide for yourself, okay, do you have a pathway that you have decided, or are you really bullish on a certain blockchain or a certain vertical, and you feel like you stand a best shot by going deeper down the rabbit hole on that vertical itself? Or if you are not yet decided and you feel like, hey, the industry is still maturing over time, right? Then you want to take a more broader overview of what's happening in the space itself, then work for a company that's a bit more neutral on that front. I mean, look at CMC, CoinMarketCap, for example. We, us being at the top of the funnel for like all this different like traffic coming into crypto or learning about crypto, we see all the different pathway forming within the crypto space itself. So you kind of have a very good bird's eye view of what's happening in the space itself. So I'll kind of compare it to like, do you want to be a generalist at this point in time, or a specialist in a particular like blockchain or a particular vertical itself? There's really no right or wrong. I think either way, as long as you do your best, you're gonna go far, right? So I think it's just more of like being truthful to yourself. Like at this point in time, do you stand a better chance, or do you feel like you stand a better shot being a specialist, working with a better team on that front, or like being a generalist? Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
No props.
I have a question. Yeah, so thanks so much for your sharing. And my question is mainly just to get a rough sensing of the current startup landscape in Singapore. So it's to all three of you. So let's say you are a student who will graduate next month. Which 3 Singapore-based startups will you apply for without a second thought, excluding your current firms?
Oh, this is a tough one.
I think Oh, sorry, go ahead,
No,
Jess.
no, go ahead, Krishna.
I can give you one off the top of my head, which I think has got mad potential, is Carousel. It's Singapore-based, started locally, just thriving. Over the last 5 years, we've really seen it grow very quickly, and I think that's a startup to have gotten in on 5 years ago. So I think that's one to consider applying to.
I guess maybe sort of to rephrase the question, if I'm 1 month away from graduation, then I think I'm in a very dangerous spot if I haven't applied for a job yet. No, but in all honesty, I think to me, actually, I'll probably take on a more contrarian approach where I know we are sort of like trying to support local, like Singapore startup, but I think also because of COVID, you start seeing a lot more international companies coming in and companies that's hiring in a more remote manner. So I actually sort of like look at companies not just in Singapore, but even overseas as well, where I think right now, because of everyone's just working from home or like working in a smaller setup, so there's really no notion of like I need to work in a Singapore-based company anymore. And I think we have seen a lot of very successful companies, hire a very remote global team as well. I think that's the beauty of it, because you get to work with people from different walks of life who have gone through different life experiences, who have different cultures and different values, and you just learn along the way. And so actually, I would sort of optimize for that early on. And there's a ton of these companies doing, who are hiring globally as well. And I think the point is just to have a very open mind of like, which vertical am I most bullish on, or am I most excited about, and who in the world is building that, and I want to work for that company. And because it's global, anyone would like, I think that recruitment becomes a lot more exponentially like broad. Yeah, so I think that's probably how I would kind of think about it.
Yeah, I think if you ask me, wow, like which particular startup to pinpoint, I honestly cannot, because there's really a lot of like very good ones, I think, in terms of culture, and they all offer different things. So I think it depends again on like what kind of work are you looking at, what kind of vertical are you looking at, and I think it's also about like how much risk are you willing to take. So risk also comes with like which stage of the company, which stage this company is at, right? Generally, instead of like choosing a particular startup, I think I would, maybe if I was looking for something in this COVID situation where it's a little bit uncertain, I probably will look for something that offers a product that can scale internationally. I think that would be something that I would be looking for. Probably also something that doesn't require a lot of fixed capital in that sense. Yeah, so in terms of like which company, I can't really like advise you, because if whatever I say, I think it might seem biased. Yeah, or like, I might have some favorites, but I generally prefer companies that I think are in the technological space, or at least make use of some form of technology, because I think that really helps to accelerate things, and it helps to also like help them scale globally. Yeah.
Okay,
that's my advice.
Thanks.
Thank you. And if I think we are right on time, and if there are no more questions, and before I end, any last words from our speakers? Is anyone looking for interns, partners, startups to work with, or are there any product promotions or services that you guys would like to plug?
Yeah, we are looking for interns. Yeah, you can apply to Talenox if you want to. We are looking for like full-timers as well, but I think instead of like making it a job thing, maybe, I don't know if this helps, but I think perhaps if you want to like really know a lot about like the startup scene and entrepreneurship, like there are also pretty good like books and even TV series out there. So I'm just gonna, like, if you're very bored from studying for your exams already and just need a little bit of a de-stress, I would recommend like watching maybe like The Dropout. Yeah, it's quite good. You can watch Silicon Valley as well. It's a TV series about like, a technological startup based in Silicon Valley lah. So yeah, in terms of books, I would recommend like maybe let me see. Actually, there are so many good books out there, yeah, that you can actually consider reading. I think reading books, reading articles, just keep reading. That would really help you understand, like, how to run a startup, how to join a startup, and yeah, this whole scene itself, rather than just hearing from the few of us. Yeah, that's all.
And I guess sort of to add to Jesslyn's point, I think like what she mentioned earlier, if there are any sort of like follow-up question, you can always reach out to us on like LinkedIn or anywhere that's convenient. Yeah, I'm more than happy to like have any follow-up conversations around this sort of topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, second, everything Jesslyn and Shaun mentioned. So, I think Flash Coffee is always looking for interns, looking for people who are looking to help drive departments from ops, venture development, marketing. So feel free to reach out. It's a really fun, exciting, interesting business to be a part of. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys if you're keen to just get a taste of that startup life very early on. We're still in Series A, so you will really get kind of an unadulterated entrepreneurship experience. And yeah, happy to hear from you. And for those of you who haven't tried Flash, give it a shot and make it look like my marketing is working.
Okay, thank you very much to Shaun, Krshna, and Jesslyn for this super insightful sharing. And I think we covered quite a wide range of topics, including company culture, product tips for aspiring founders, qualities that a staff is looking for in employees, etc. And I think this conversation will really go a long way in inspiring all of us to seriously consider a career in the startup world if we aren't in it already. Last part, Gerald, who do you think asked the most thoughtful question? Maybe you can pick someone, and that person can contact us later to redeem the gifts.
Or the panelists, which one do you think like make you all like thought-provoking and stuff? Yeah. Anyone? Or I have to choose. I really don't know that.
I have a personal favorite for Mai's question.
Okay.
Okay, congratulations, Mai.
Okay, congrats.
There was no debate here.
Congrats, Mai. Okay, you can contact Gerald later, or me.
You can.
Okay.
I put on my Telegram handle. Yeah, you can just text me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, actually, I'm working on a pitch deck, so rushing for deadline submission. So, yeah, I listened to the talk at the same time. So sorry that I couldn't turn on my camera just now.
That's some solid multitasking.
Okay, thank you, speakers. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.